Hello fellow fairy friends, it's Allie. Welcome to my February wrap up and my March TBR. But really quick, I want to talk about some comments that I've gotten on my last few videos. A lot of you hate this microphone and you hate that I hold it and that I don't attach it to my clothes. Well, guess what? Get over it. I'm never going to attach it to my clothes because then I can't do this. What do you think, Ellie? I need to be able to ask my cat questions, and you can't do that when it's attached to your lapel, so get over it. I read 5 books in the month of February, which is very great for me. I'm a slow reader. I'm the mayor of Slow Readerville. I'm also a mom. I work full-time. I have things to do. I cannot read as much as I would like to, so 5 books, that is fantastic. The first book I read was Look Closer by David Ellis. I regret reading this book. I regret not DNFing this book. I talked about it in my last video, but I'm going to talk about it again. This was a 1 star for me. I went against my better judgment and picked up this book. I had seen some glowing reviews and I just thought, what the heck? Let's give this a whirl. Let's give it a try. I regret it. I regret wasting an Audible credit on it. I wish I could get it back. This is one of the most women written by men books I have read in a really, really long time. This book begins with a woman hanging in her house, and the male main character is there, and guess what he does? I'll give you one guess. Yep, he remarks upon her physical appearance, which I actually won't entirely fault the book for, because that's kind of part of his character. He's a little grimy. He's not a great dude. But this book does not subvert any of the misogyny ever. In fact, it just builds upon, and it does not stop. All of the women in this book are conniving, money hungry. They have ulterior motives. They're just overly sexual. I don't know. They're not written in a believable way. It was so bad. It was so cringe. One of the points of views, the woman has a background in sex work. She was a prostitute. That is written in a way that we're meant to view that as like a stain on her record, like a black mark on her past, and we're meant to not trust her because of it. We're supposed to say, oh wow, she's been in sex work before. We shouldn't trust her. She's capable of bad things, so we got to keep an eye out on her. And I didn't like that. I didn't appreciate it. Also, the story was dumb overall, honestly. 1 star. Next up, I read Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. That name really rang a bell. And I kept thinking to myself, why does that sound so familiar? Have I read something by this author before? I was trying to pull memories from the deep recesses of my brain and I just couldn't do it, so I had to consult Goodreads. Kristen Ciccarelli wrote The Last Namsara, which I read years ago, and I think I rated it like 3 or 4 stars. It's a dragon book, but I don't remember much about it, so obviously it wasn't that memorable. Anyways, Heartless Hunter is a book that I shouldn't have liked, but I did. I have a lot of gripes with this book, but it was a mood read. I was in the mood for it, and also it felt so nostalgic. This reads like it was written in the late 2010s. This felt like the books that we used to read on BookTube back in the day when it was just fun and everything was beautiful and nothing hurt. So I don't know. I had a good time. I would classify this book as a new adult romantasy. The main characters are 18, I believe, and there is some spice. It's not overly graphic, but you definitely know what's going on. I don't know if that's important to you, but just heads up. This follows Rune. She's a secret witch. This is a witch hunter dynamic. So by day, Rune is a witch. She's trying to keep her witch powers undercover. And she's a socialite. She pretends to be vapid and shallow, but by night she uses her intel that she gets during the day to assassinate witch hunters, and she calls herself the Crimson Moth. I really liked the magic system in this book. It's blood magic, but the magic system is kind of based on menstrual cycles, and Rune sometimes bottles her period blood to use in magic. Like she draws symbols in her period blood, and I just thought that was very feminist, very metal. I loved it. I really did. As for the things I have an issue with, the world building is so vague. At first I thought it was a Regency, but then there were mentions of guns and more modern dress, and so I was like, is it Edwardian? Is it Victorian? I think it's kind of a mixture of all three, but that bothered me. I just wish it was a little more solid in the world building. I want to be able to picture where we are, what we're doing, what this is based on. Yeah, I don't know. Also, it's a love triangle between two brothers, but never at any point was I unsure of who she was going to end up with. Like, I feel like if you're going to do a love triangle, you have to make me guess. You have to make me say, oh, I don't know, maybe she might go with that brother. Maybe, oh, maybe not. I don't know. I feel like I'm getting pulled back and forth. Never was I unsure about how this was going to end up, and that leads me into my third gripe. It is so predictable, like overly predictable. But again, somehow I enjoyed it and I rated it 4 stars. So after that, I picked up a love song for Ricki Wilde. This is by the same author that wrote 7 Days in June, which I love. That is like a 6-star book for me. But this one just didn't hit in the same way as 7 Days in June. It's very interesting in the setup. It's really unlike a lot of books that I've read. It's genre bending. It's a contemporary romance, but also there's a fantasy element, and I don't want to say what that element is because I feel like it's a spoiler, so you'll just have to read it for yourself if you're interested. I did like that there were historical elements. It features the Harlem Renaissance. There's a lot of big historical names that you'll recognize. I just thought that was a little fun touch. I really like how this author writes characters. I like how this author sets up the worlds and the tension, but I felt like a lot of the dialogue in this book was cringe. It's kind of written in the same voice as 7 Days in June, but where I felt like it worked in that book, it did not work in this setting. I just wish it was written a little bit differently. Also, this is a romance and it is so insta-lovey. I mean, it literally is insta-love. It makes sense within the context of the story, but I just never believed it. Never for 1 second. I just couldn't get on board with it. And that's such a bummer when you're reading a romance book and you pretty much like everything but the romance. Like, the romance is the point in a romance book, and when you don't like that, then yeah, it's a letdown. It really is. I think I rated this 3 stars. Next, I picked up an author that I've been meaning to read for a really long time, P. Jelly Clark. I read Dead Cattail Assassins. This was interesting in all the ways. I was pleasantly surprised by this. It follows an assassin who is sent on this assignment, and when she gets there, when she's about to take out the mark, she recognizes them, and it completely turns her world upside down. It makes her question everything. She has to find out who sent her on this mission, why they sent her on the mission. It leads her to try to unravel all of these secrets, and yeah, tension just builds from there. But what I loved about this book is not the plot, surprisingly. It was the world building, the writing, the character work. I found the characters so compelling. I loved the dialogue. It perfectly blended humor and serious moments. Like, there's a lot of like intense fight scenes, there's serious moments, but it kept a lot of humor there. Hello, it's Allie, back again on a completely different day to finish this video. The thing about being a mom to a 10-month-old is that everything that I want to do for myself, such as reading, making booktube or book talk videos, editing, cleaning, cooking, eating, self-care, that all has to happen during very short windows, either during nap times or after my kid goes to bed. So yeah, most of the time when I'm filming these, it's either late at night or during naps. Anyways, we're doing what we can with the time that we have. I think I left off talking about Ring Shout. That was the last book that I read in the month of February, also by P. Jelly Clark, and this confirmed what I felt in Dead Cattail Assassins, that this author is a master at dropping you into these really strange situations and you're immediately on board with it. This takes place in the South. I think it was 7 years after Birth of a Nation came out, and racism is this awful, basically disease that infects people and turns them into gross, disgusting, gruesome monsters, and our main characters are having to fight and kill them with swords and guns. And I was like, yes, of course it is. I'm completely on board. I love this. I ended up rating it a 4 out of 5 stars. I took off a star because solid first half, it lost me a little bit in the second half because it just got so surreal, strange, a little too strange for me, but that's just a personal preference. Overall, this was very good. And then as for my March TBR, there are a couple books that I started in February that I have not finished. Rebel Witch is one of those. It's the sequel to Heartless Hunter. I'm currently listening to it on audiobook, and this is so far just as good as the first one. This definitely feels like this author planned this duology. You know, when you read some books, especially books in a series, and you can tell that the author didn't really know where they were going to go with the story in the second book, and it just feels like it meanders, or it wasn't as strong as the first book. It just felt like less thought out, less planned, less fleshed out. That's not the case with Rebel Witch, which I really, really like, I really appreciate. And then I also started Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan, also listening to this on audiobook. First of all, I love this cover. The model for the cover is beautiful. I wish I had a jawline like this. I really do. The older I get, the more I want variety in my romance books, especially contemporary romance. Like I want more than just reading about 18, 19, 20-year-olds falling in love for the first time. So this feels like a breath of fresh air. This follows a couple who was married. They're now divorced. They started a restaurant together. It put a lot of strain on their relationship. They are finding their way back to each other. It's a second chance romance. And yeah, I'm having a good time with it so far. I think I'm about like 20% into it. The narrator's really great. Yeah, I'm excited to continue this one. Next, I will be starting Rain and Ruin. This was a book that was recommended to me a few times in the comments of my Romantasy Sucks video. If you haven't watched that, check it out. It's so far the most viewed video that I've ever had on my channel ever. Wasn't expecting that, but pleasantly surprised. And it seems like a lot of people have the same feelings that I do about Romantasy. A lot of people love Rain and Ruin. I'm gonna go into this blind. I don't really have a choice, really, because I did read part of the description and it was very vague. So I don't know much about this book or what the characters are like or even what the central plot is. And I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm not gonna watch any reviews or dig further for any more information. I feel like I'm just gonna go in with low expectations and see what happens. I'm gonna pick up The Wedding People. This is everywhere right now. I think it was a Goodreads Choice Award winner I think. Don't quote me on that. I'm not positive, but it's also a New York Times bestseller. I really like this cover as well. This follows a woman who is recently divorced. She goes to stay at this beautiful inn in Rhode Island, and when she's there, she gets mistaken as a wedding guest for this big wedding that's happening at this venue. I don't know much other than that, but I've heard great things. And then if I finish that book, because that's already one, two, three, that's 4 books. That's kind of what I average a month. I might pick up Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. I enjoy Ali Hazelwood books in general. The only one that I didn't really like was Love Hypothesis. Oh, Ellie's trying to play with my hands. The Love Hypothesis is the one that I didn't really like, and it's so funny because that was her like first big hit book, and so I was really unsure about her as an author for a really long time, but I've enjoyed everything that I've read since. So I have high hopes for Deep End. I've heard that this is pretty spicy, so we'll see.